everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cinema Crusaders. We're back from my WonderCon hiatus. I hope that you've all been missing us just a little bit. And as you know, the last time we were with you, I think it was the last time, or the time before last, we talked about the movie The Black Hole. And in that podcast, we mentioned a movie that was the spiritual successor to The Black Hole. I'm talking about none other than the movie, the classic featuring Sam Neill and Lawrence Fishburne, among others, Event Horizon. So we're going to talk about that movie today, all the ins and outs, all the scariness of that movie, and I'm sure we're going to get into some theories and other things. But before I do that, I want to introduce you to my co-hosts. I've been missing these guys, looking forward to potting with them. Sloppy Spoilers has also been on a little hiatus, so it's been great to catch up with them, and it's going to be great to catch up with them on this podcast. So first, I want to introduce you to a writer, a teacher. He has right now Blitz out in the Blitzverse from Revelation Comics. And he's also involved in the Omen Comics podcast with Michael Nunley. And I'm talking about none other than Steve Shadewing Sellers. How you doing, Steve?
Doing pretty good. And then actually, this is one of those movies that I really love going back to. I actually had written a text review about this, I want to say last year, but I don't mind going back and revisiting this because there's a lot of depth to this movie.
Yeah, there really is. And the more you get into it, the scarier it is, I think, in my opinion. You know, I love demonic stuff and horror, and, you know, it's kind of what I write about. So this is great. It's absolutely fantastic. And I have to say, you had a great quote on Twitter about it, which is, this is the best space horror movie that doesn't feature a xenomorph. Classic
Yep.
line.
Yeah, I mean, because you pretty much have to say that Alien is the definitive when it comes to sci-fi horror. I would say this is about my number 2.
Cool. And next, I want to introduce the man. I'm going to say it again because I say it affectionately. He is the mouth from the South because he's got so much to say about everything. He is a font of information. He is also an artist and writer in his own right. He does his own art. Check out the Bracyverse, some really cool characters he's been posting up on social media. And he's also an artist for an ASAP Comics main continuity project. I'm talking about none other than Jeff, Dr. Fate, Bracy.
Hello, everyone out there. Yeah, looking forward to digging in this. Ever since I first discovered H.P. Lovecraft, I've been a tremendous fan of cosmic horror. When I first watched Alien, I didn't realize that was cosmic horror at the time, but I really glommed onto the idea of sci-fi and horror. It's a tremendously appealing mix, and this film has it in spades. And like Steve, I'd say after Alien, this is probably my number 2 sci-fi horror out there.
Absolutely. And I have to say that I'm also a big fan of Sam Neill as an actor, but Sam Neill in horror.
Powerhouse cast in this film.
Yeah. 2 of my favorite horror movies, Event Horizon and In the Mouth of Madness, both featuring Sam Neill.
Yep. So, also Lovecraftian.
Yeah, very, very good.
Very, very Lovecraftian. And I would say, like, it is one of Neil's, best films that he's done, which unfortunately hasn't been talked about nearly enough.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get to In the Mouth of Madness because that's another movie that, you know, the more you peel back the layers, the more disturbing it gets in a lot of ways. And I do want to give a little shout out plug for myself real quick. Offset number 1 is over half drawn. I'm looking forward to be released this summer, probably either end of May or June, but we'll see. And the long game is finally finishing the long editing process.
Oh, nice.
Will also be out this summer. So, definitely looking forward to those. And I'll be giving you guys more updates in the weeks to come on those as well.
Read it. It's great.
Yeah. So with that, and it's been the story hasn't been tweaked, but it's been re-edited to get rid of all my horrible grammar and stuff that was still left in there. So with that said, let's get into Event Horizon because, this movie is absolutely incredible, I would say. And I've already mentioned it as a spiritual successor to The Black Hole. So let me tell you a little bit about what I mean by that. And you guys feel free to chime in on this because I think it's important to set that groundwork. At the end of The Black Hole, at least in the ending, the original ending, in some versions, Disney has cut this ending out because it was, I'm not going to say controversial, but it was controversial with Disney. You see them go through a heaven and hell scene, but they, by going between worlds or going through the black hole, they end up in hell. Well, this movie is all about
the bad guys end up in hell. The good guys end up someplace better.
True, but the good guys did see hell as they were traversing through, so they saw the bad guys in hell. So as this movie is about the first human faster than light ship, and it's designed by Sam Neill's character, and the ship goes out past Jupiter. It has to get out, far away from the sun.
Goes out past Neptune. That's
Neptune.
where it reappears.
Right, and they engage the FTL drive and take off, and then the ship disappears, and it's missing for
7 years.
7 years. Okay.
Yes.
7 years.
So 7 years go by, and suddenly the ship shows up again, and there's a distress signal. And lo and behold, Lawrence Fishburne and his crew in a rescue ship. So they're kind of like, think a military version of Firefly, a tight crew, a small, tight, well-worked ship. And they go out there and they rescue people, traders or whatever else that's going on out there. And they're tasked with going out there to find out where the hell this ship, the Event Horizon, has been all this time. And, of course, they're given one passenger to take with them, Sam Neill, because he's the one who designed the ship, and supposedly he's going to be the expert. And they go out on the ship, and long story short, they find out that the ship, when it disappeared from our world and went faster than light, well, you end up in other dimensions, and one of those dimensions, let's just call it hell. I mean, they don't say that, but it basically is. It could be a lot of different things. Depends on, it could be the 666 planes of the abyss. They end up in one of those. It could be a whole host of things, but it's not good. It's not good at all. And the ship comes back, and the ship is now possessed and alive. And this ship wants more people to take back with it. And hijinks ensue, good, macabre, horrific hijinks. And I'll go ahead and leave it at that, because I want to go, and that's a high level, but I want to go around and let you guys highlight some things from the movie that stand out for you before we get into performances and then the concept of the movie. So I'm going to go to Steve first. Out of the general plot of the movie, what is one of the things, that stands out for you the most? It was like, this is new, or this breaks ground, or this is disturbing, or whatever it is, because I think this movie really broke a lot of ground that, Jeff mentioned Lovecraft, but I never think we'd seen a combination of that kind of horror with sci-fi before, even with Alien. Alien is a different kind of horror concept. So.
Okay, I'm not going to get too much into the horror aspects, because I kind of want to save something for another podcast about this, but I will go into a few broad points. One of them is, I think Jeff is definitely right about the Lovecraftian, probably not necessarily the way he was thinking, but it definitely is there, which is the whole idea of Lovecraftian horror is that it's based on the fear of the unknown. And you really don't get any more unknown than outer space. They take it to the next level with this movie, because we're talking about the fear of not just going into outer space and all the things that are in outer space. We're talking about the things that, what would happen if you actually got a faster than light drive to work? What crazy things are out in the fabric of the universe that we can't even imagine. So there's a lot of that, and they I think there's definitely an influence from the Black Hole, certainly in that respect, which also took a little bit from 2001. So you have a definite pedigree, that goes from Clark through the Black Hole to Lovecraft, to this particular film. So you have that aspect of it. The other aspect is that they were very open about saying, the Paul Anderson did, that this movie is The Shining in space. And if you look at it, in addition to that, that is very, very plainly clear, especially with the character of Weir, who is the Jack Torrance of this movie. But he's also Dr. Reinhardt from the Black Hole at the same time. So those are the two characters that basically are the foundation of who Weir is in this movie. So not only do you have that, not only do you have the idea of the haunted starship, you even have blatant lifts, like they actually rip off the blood, the river of blood that ends up flowing at the end of the movie. So they did all of those things. But at the same time, all of these influences come together to make this movie really distinct and interesting, and a different kind of sci-fi horror, because it also does involve a lot of hard SF, except for the areas which is clearly like so advanced that we can't understand it, and that's where the fear comes in. So, in addition to all the psychological horror, I mean, most of these characters are really good. So, you get a really great package coming out of this.
Now, I would say one of the things I enjoyed about this movie also, as far as it pertains to real life, is I think it puts a real exclamation point on how brave explorers are. The explorers of the past and the explorers we will have in the future. We're talking about going to Mars. We went to the moon. Someday we'll land on an asteroid. Someday we'll land even further away. Those we make those things seem routine because there's a lot of very professional people. But when you're out there, millions of miles away from home, something goes wrong. That's a pretty lonely feeling, and you definitely get that in this movie, I think. So.
Yeah, think about the first people who came to this continent from England and Spain and all that. They had no idea what they were getting into, and that's a ballsy move.
Yeah. Now, both you and Jeff talked about Lovecraft, and I'm going to put this in Jeff's ear. The writer who this, I see Lovecraft in this, but for me, I see a lot of Dante in this, and I think I see a lot of Dante because a lot of my writing about the demonic and things kind of draws on Dante. And specifically in this movie, I see the sixth circle, which is heresy. So I think these people committed heresy by breaking the laws of physics. And
I would also add Faust.
Yeah.
I like that.
Because I would say Weir is definitely a Faustian figure.
Yeah. So, I just wanted to put that in Jeff's ear and then go ahead and set Jeff loose and let him run with that. But yeah, that's kind of what I see when I watch it, but I definitely see the Lovecraft as well. So what do you think about that,
Well,
Jeff?
the Lovecraft comes in, and that's become a catch-all for cosmic horror because he's the first guy who really got into that thing. But cosmic horror is broader than tentacled space monsters, if you will. Cosmic horror is somebody coined the phrase. Atheist once wrote, or Lovecraft wrote horror for atheists, as they put it. Whereas man is insignificant, the universe doesn't care about you. We're just a mote of dust floating in the great cosmos. And that's the sort of thing that you get here. I look at this film and I see this as the dark mirror of 2001, where we have a benevolent entity of great and enormous power and wisdom and knowledge. And now we have this malevolent force from something far beyond our understanding. And in the context of the black hole, you can see a lot of parallels, whereas they have this massive grand ship in the event horizon, and like the Cygnus, it has a Gothic structure to it. And what comes out in the 7 years' time, a smaller, sleeker, possibly more capable ship. It had a different mission, and yet it's able to travel out to the furthest extent of the solar system. So I'm already seeing these parallels. I'm pretty sure that either the writer or Paul Anderson himself were very aware of what they were doing in terms of this. The opening credits even start with like a black hole image as the credits are the credits are going and the music's playing. So there's definitely parallels. They definitely mined a lot of other films to get things here. One of the major themes of this film for me is I'm definitely going to get into the religious allegory, but it's a haunted house in space. You can argue that Alien is like that because it is a haunted spaceship. It's got a haunted, it's got a creature lurking about in there.
Sure.
But this is even more so. I mean, the brilliance of putting it outside of a stormy planet, and it starts off way above, but by the time they get to it, it's down in the atmosphere or close to it as the orbit's decaying. And so all the time when they're on this ship, you constantly see a thunderstorm. It was a dark and stormy night outside, and there are these flashes of lightning inside this gothically styled ship, and it is purposely gothic. If you remember, several of there are these columns that are in the ship, and they don't appear to be like columns that you would expect in a space vessel. These were actually modeled off of things from Gothic cathedrals in Europe.
Well, the engine room is a house of horrors of spinning blades. I mean, it's just
like if you look at the gravity drive is a reverse Iron Maiden, and when what's her name Peters dies, How does she die? She's
Yeah.
approaching the vision of her son through a coffin-shaped passageway. Talk about saying like, yeah, you're about to die. You're walking through a big long coffin, lady.
Yeah.
So there's all this imagery all over the place. And again, getting into the Dante point, the ship itself is designed like a cross. The windows are cross patterns. The doors open and shut, leaving these cross patterns in them. So it's all over the place in there. The religious allegory is in there, and I thought scientifically some of the things were kind of neat, like the gravity couches, unlike say an Alien, where they just put them to cryogenically asleep, whereas they're using the ionic drive. So even though you're in the weightlessness of space, mass still counts. Weight is a function of gravity. Mass is something you have as a body. So it does take significant power to manipulate that, to accelerate it through space. So putting them in a fluid mass, I thought was actually pretty cool. And therein, again, is a birthing process, if you will. And by the end of the film, when you see people are like, are they reborn? Are they born into a new world? There's so much you can get into with this. Just given the basic types of imagery that are all over this place. The Dr. Weir is clearly a Faustian thing, and what I think is particularly interesting, because he created this, even though the ship hadn't gone to wherever it goes. Now, for those who haven't seen the film yet, he at one point describes it as basically he's creating a wormhole. The gravity drive opens a gate, but exploring the darker side of potential science fiction, when you create a wormhole, we don't necessarily know what's in the wormhole. If we're passing through a dimension that is going to condense space in our world into a fraction of a point, so you can instantaneously go from one spot to another. And this is something we see in comics like the X-Men. When Nightcrawler teleports, it's very instantaneous for him. But at the same time, he's actually passing through a dimension that has all this fiery brimstone atmosphere. That's where the Banff comes from. So we get that sort of thing here. And then later, when he is fully accepted the ship as his Lord and Savior, if you will, he describes it as a dimension of pure chaos, of evil, if you will. So it's obviously not a very good place. And there's like great quotes about, like, you can't break the laws of physics without there being some sort of consequence. It goes beyond anything that we know as far as like science or reality. And so there's just a limitless amount of things to play with here. And the ship is literally indwelt with this malevolent presence. It's possessed like the little girl from The Exorcist. The ship starts reacting to him like a living thing, as Stark puts it. It's like it's got antibodies. It's responding to us, and you can actually see it when certain things are said. When Captain Miller talks about like flying out, it's like they might have been able to get away, maybe, but as soon as he said like, "Yeah, I'm going to fly out and I'm going to blow this thing up," the ship was like, "Oh, no, you're not." Power fluctuations start. It starts moving the plot forward to take care of the crew to make sure they're not getting anywhere. So yeah, you're not dealing with something that's just smart and just alive. It's also very intelligent, and like any good demonic presence, demons are particularly dangerous in the context of horror and sci-fi, or I guess horror, in that they know you, they know your weaknesses, they know your soul, they can look inside you, and they can really mess with you, like telling Father Karras that his mother does something in hell. And so this thing gets at the crew and they're in their weakest ways. And because it's messing with them, there are times I thought like, oh, that's stupid. Why would you do that? But if it's messing with your head, you're not always going to be thinking in the right way. And you actually see this crew, this very professional crew, breaking down as they're on this ship. So it's really getting at each of them, even if they don't admit it, even if you don't see each one's personal hallucinations or fears brought to life. So I really dig that aspect of this.
Well, that is a great segue into some examinations of a few of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like what you're talking about as far as break the laws of physics, because I think I think this is a aspect of horror that needs to be explored more by more writers. Is
Well,
that
it's an aspect of horror, and it's also an aspect of sci-fi, because sci-fi often
right?
like, oh man, we got to be careful messing with AI. We got to be careful messing with nanotechnology. We got to be careful messing with nuclear and all these other things. Every iteration of sci-fi is always warning us why they want to show us the glory and the advantages of what we can do. It should always come with that balance of should we.
Yeah. But
Like,
from a demonic perspective, I think we've done that a lot in science fiction. But from a horror perspective, you could say that demons wait for us to break. When you write demons, they wait for us to break the natural laws, and then we're fair game. So when you start messing with nature, in whatever way, genetics or whatever else, I mean, there's so much fertile ground here to write about, where you start breaking the natural laws that are set up, and suddenly you have taken a giant step. One small step for man, one giant leap into a demonic dimension.
Sure. Look at Dr.
Samuel in another movie about man basically crossing the lines of science and going where man was not meant to go.
Yeah. I mean, like, look at the hubris of Dr. Weir. Yeah. He's told by the crew, this highly professional crew, it opened up and it sucked him in and spit him out, and he just refuses to believe any of it. He's just full of arrogance and hubris, like, oh, that can't possibly happen. I know this thing inside and out. But he also made an artificial black hole, the most destructive force in the universe. Yeah. No, it's safe, it's fine. He spends half the movie trying to explain away everything because he doesn't want to own what he's done.
Yeah, and then you fast forward from this movie when it came out about 10 years, and you find out that they're trying to create an artificial black hole in CERN. So, life imitates art sometimes.
Yeah.
And, so let's go with Dr. Weir, and then also the captain. Let me check his name, Captain Miller. Yep, by Lawrence Fishburne. And let's contrast these two. I'm going to go to Jeff first and then go around the horn. So I'll go Jeff, Steve, and then I'll finish up. Contrast the path of these two, because you were talking a minute ago about being tempted or being shown visions of something terrible. I want to contrast their reactions, because both of these men are shown something terrible in their past. In the case of Weir, it's his wife committing suicide. In the case of Miller, it's a time when he had to leave a crew member to die in fire in space, and both of these instances, but the reactions of these two are very, very, very different. So I'm going to start with Jeff and then go to Steve, and then I'll throw in any comments afterwards. But.
Yeah, these are obviously the two biggest arcs in the film. The other characters are pretty nice, but they're not the meat of the story, if you will. And it's a really wonderful cast in this film. So hats off to everybody. But the meaty roles go to these two actors, Lawrence Fishburne and Sam Neill. One of the things I find most interesting is when the ship returns to Neptune, it calls out all the way to Earth orbit to Dr. Weir, and it uses his wife to do it. Even though he hasn't been on the ship, he can't be. You wouldn't think he could be influenced by it, but I guess something about messing with this gravitonic drive gave it a connection to him that was more personal than anybody else could possibly have. So it starts haunting him with his wife. So both these men are carrying a tremendous amount of guilt. Weir, because he neglected his wife. He was too involved in his work. I'm sure he thought was, the most important thing. I'm making history. I'm doing all this. And that's, again, this ties into his hubris as a scientist and his ambition as a man. I'm doing this great, great thing. And in the end, it cost me the person who's most dear to me. Miller's guilt is from doing the right thing. Nemesis, as a military man, sometimes people have to be sacrificed to save the whole. Like the old Star Trek thing, like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. The captain had a choice when the Goliath caught fire and started exploding. Do I save the entire crew, or do I try and save this one guy and maybe kill us all? And he had to make that hard choice, that cold calculus that comes with being a leader of men in a dangerous profession. But he's never gotten over it, and he's never told anybody. He's never told his new crew about it. And once you discover this part of his personality, all of a sudden, how he carries himself makes a lot more sense. Like, he comes across as real hard ass to start with. Even though this crew work well with him, and they clearly are very fond of them, he's really tough on them, and he's exceptionally tough on Dr. Weir because he doesn't know anything about him. He doesn't like anybody on his ship who's not a well-oiled member of this crew. I know where you stand. I know what you can do, that sort of thing. And the two men are, they butt heads this way because one is a man of science and the other one's a man of action. And, Lawrence Fishburne is significantly bigger than Sam Neill. So there's all these great contrasts going on. And Weir, the longer this goes on, he starts to realize what's going on, just like everybody else, but he starts lying about it. He is being seduced by the ship that's using his wife to seduce him. Whereas Miller's every instinct is to get off this. Like, I love the fact that when he's on the ship the first time, he calls it a tomb. He wants to get off this ship as soon as possible. As soon as he knows there's nobody to save, we go. Mission over, we collect the data, we just go. And in the end, Weir makes that Faustian bargain. He succumbs to his sin, and he falls from whatever grace he might have had. The pride goeth before the fall. The hubris leads him down, as well as the grief. Whereas Miller has the redemption. At least, not that he didn't do the right thing before, but the only way he probably felt that he could do anything, because he swore to himself he would never lose anybody again, he sacrifices himself for his remaining crew when he knows they're all going to be taken to this awful dimension. And, he even tries to make the bargain, take me. He's like, no, we're taking you all. It's like, no, you're not. And he blows the connection between the forward hull and the engine room of the ship. And so that's, a pretty significant arc. It's a heroic tragedy for Miller's part, and it's a terrible, terrible fall for Dr. Weir.
Okay. I definitely have a few things I want to follow up on that, but first I want to hit Steve. What did you think about the contrast between these two characters?
Yeah, I still have a bit of uncertainty because I think there are a couple of different ways you can look at Weir. One way you can look at him was as somebody who might have been salvageable had he not been tempted, with the ghost of his wife, had he not been tempted with the promise of, more knowledge and learning more about the universe and all of this. And you can kind of look at him as having been corrupted in a way that Jack Torrance is. But there's a part of me that really wonders whether Weir always was bad. Because he seems to be not really all that helpful, like the entire time he's on the ship. And I have wondered more than once whether he already kind of made his mind before he even got there, and that the corruption maybe happened earlier, and it's just that he didn't really become aware of it until he got on the ship. And if that's kind of looking at it kind of that way, it's kind of really, really dark. But I think it could work, especially since we do know that there is a connection between the consciousness of the ship, whatever extra dimensional thing is taking it over, and Weir. But also kind of keeping in mind that this is this weird space-time event, because we're talking about the gravity drive that can manipulate space and time. So he knows that Weir is his creator, or at least created this thing, and I think it probably has been reaching out to Weir for some time. So and we see that this entity, has this way of corrupting and destroying everybody that goes on there. We saw the previous crew basically all go mad and murder each other after it fell under the domain of the ship. So I really am kind of wondering, whether Weir kind of was already under that influence beforehand, and he was already going to make that choice, or whether the corruption happened the minute he sets on there. Because we definitely see that Weir is very protective of the ship from the beginning. He seems to care more about the ship than he does about anybody on the crew, like at all, which I found really interesting. And I'm kind of wondering whether Weir almost has kind of like an attachment as its creator. Like this is not just my ship. This is my child.
Yeah.
And so he's acting to protect what he thinks is his creation, which kind of makes it really really more interesting. And it's also wound up the guilt that he has towards his wife, because he doesn't want the ship to be destroyed, because it's all he has left. Because of the guilt that he feels towards his wife, and not wanting to the ship to die because of him the same way. And so guilt for Weir drives him to a destructive end, if you want to take it in that interpretation. Miller, I think Jeff hit like all the high points with him. I think everything is about wanting to overcome the guilt that he felt because he felt he had to leave Cork to die. And he made the right decision, under the circumstances. It was either, sacrifice him or everybody dies. But I like that that for Miller, it's about, okay, I'm going to make peace with this. I'm going to acknowledge what happened. When faced with this fear, this thing that has been bothering me for years and years, and that I couldn't talk about it, I'm going to confront the reality of the situation, which he does by talking to DJ, played by Jeremy Irons.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about it. He works out his issues, and then he decides, towards the end, my way of confronting my past and dealing with this is I am going to sacrifice myself for the greater good, and I'm going to make sure that no man, that all the people under my command make it back, even if it costs me my life.
I have to say, for everybody out there, I mean, there's so many supporting casts that we could talk about who are very, very good, and you got to check them out. There's just almost too many to talk about, but the supporting cast, I mean, Jeremy Irons is one of many, and it's not often you can say that, but it's true. I mean, the supporting cast is great.
All the characters are good except for the one kid that gets killed.
Yeah, that's not Jeremy Irons. That's Jason Isaacs.
Jason Isaacs.
Who played
you're right.
His dad.
Yeah, I got my wires crossed on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
but yeah, he just an incredible character. You root for him the whole time, and then there's the guy who's the pilot, who chain smoker. I love that guy. And then
yeah. Fun fact: he is the son of the third Doctor.
Huh.
Oh wow!
Yep.
And then probably my favorite character that I rooted for the whole time was Cooper, who's kind of the action star. Cooper. I mean, I love that guy. I could have watched more movies with him. He was just absolutely wonderful.
I will say one last thing about Weir, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Right before he finally succumbs, when he finds Peters, there's a moment, and like you said, we only really see him caring about the ship more than anything because he can't wrap his head around anything that's not scientific for a while.
Uh-huh.
And he actually mourns her. But that's like his last chance at remaining human before he just gives up.
Yeah.
So I don't think he was a good man, like Steve said, but this thing is, we know at least had been working on him for 52 days while he was in the tank.
Yeah. I will say, well, first I'm going to hit the easier one, which is Captain Miller. I think you guys hit a lot of the high points. The only thing I'll say that is another thing that I would add that is also interesting about Miller is he's also a man of science in the sense that he is a starship captain. He's a captain. He's out there. He's dealing with these things. However, the big difference between him and Weir that I see, because I could see Miller denying what is going on around him for a long time and denying it to the point where Weir did. But Miller has been been out there enough that eventually he's like, there's some weird shit in this world and I'm dealing with it right now. And eventually when he makes that switch, he goes from being starship captain to fighting to save his crew's life against whatever the hell is hunting them,
Sometimes I would say Miller is the pragmatic voice. He's very, very practical, whereas Weir is very much in his head, very much into theory and the scientific ideas. But Miller's very much a practical guy because he's a guy who's living out there, and having to deal with everything, all these weird things out there.
Yeah, look at how arrogant he is with the crew. Even it's like, they're asking him to explain how this works. And it's like, well, it's a lot of math. It's like these guys run a spaceship,
Yeah.
and then when Cooper says he saw the games, like, I'm sure you think you saw something. He gives them that oh, you're a good little boy, pat on the shoulder, and Cooper looks like he's about to slug him.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to Weir. And I think Steve hit it right on the head, which is, while I see some elements of Faust in it, it's really kind of this unspoken thing. It's interesting. It's almost like you'd like a prequel on the building of the event horizon, because I could see a prequel where the creatures in this dark dimension offered forbidden knowledge to Weir.
That's how he makes the drive, huh?
To make the drive. And then
just like they did with Anthony Perkins in the Black Hole.
Yeah, and then it really would be a Faustian bargain. Really, while there's elements of that there, I think that Weir is almost a more evil Dr. Frankenstein.
Oh, you could, if you were to do that, you could tie that in to his wife's suicide as being his soul. And so he literally sells his soul for this knowledge. And as she goes away, his corruption is complete.
Yeah. So
I can bring back your wife. All you have to do is sacrifice your entire crew.
Yeah. But I think in this movie, Shaken Standalone, I think really, like I said, he's kind of a more evil Dr. Frankenstein, which is this ship. He has sacrificed everything. He has sacrificed his career, his standing. When the ship disappeared, I'm sure it was some sort of blow to his career and his scientific standing. He sacrificed his wife. This is the only child he will ever know.
And that's the reason for his insistence on getting the ship, because this is his chance to be back.
Yeah.
He recovers the ship. He recovers some of who he was.
Yeah. And it almost speaks to a kind of insanity that can come over a parent when protecting a child. I mean, we see it all the time.
I think there's also a sense of, if this thing is destroyed, then everything that I lost my wife for is gone as well. Yeah, and it's all for nothing.
Yeah. So, I mean, my reading of Weir is that I don't think he was necessarily an evil man, unless we go with the Faustian bargain, which I think is an interesting concept. But he was a man with a lot of character flaws. He was a man, a scientist who had a lot of the flaws that sometimes crop up in scientists in real life, where kind of a lack of common sense sometimes, a kind of institutional arrogance, those types of things. And they can happen not just as scientists. So if you're a scientist out there, please don't write me. I was a scientist once upon a time. So, but I mean, I think he's true. He had character flaws. And then this entity, or these entities, ate the man. They ate him from the inside and used his flaws against him. And ultimately, he couldn't fight back against it, because his own sins that predated this were so strong that to give this up as well, I mean, he seems to be fighting suicide on his own. He has nothing.
Yeah.
To give this up as well.
There was that great moment where he looked at the bathtub while he's shaving, and he holds the razor to his throat for just a second, and it makes you wonder what his intention was for a moment there.
Absolutely. So, I mean, he in another movie or a case of real life, we'd say that he was ripe for, demonic possession. You could see it in a movie, in a book, or if you've ever interviewed exorcists, they talk about this as well. If you happen to believe in that stuff. So, so it's very interesting, and it delves into the psychology and things like that. Just a well-written screenplay, all in all, though. I think that the depth of the characters is really there. And even Miller, who seems to be fairly straightforward, is dealing with quite a lot of things, because like Steve and Jeff both said, he would rather die himself at this point than watch another one of his crew members die. And he is really put through the ringer by having to watch numerous crew members die horribly through the movie.
I couldn't quite make it out, but when the Lewis and Clark blows up, he grabs this medallion that he wears. Is that his St. Christopher's medallion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And okay. So that's going to bring me to another point, so like I said, there's more cast and crew we could talk about, and there's a lot of them, but this podcast would be really, really long. And there's some really cool concepts I wanted to get into. And so one of them I wanted to get into, and I'm going to give it a little plug again. In my book, I love to use, and in all my writing, especially my horror writing, love to use Latin. It's the Catholic in me. It's the Catholic school education in me. I apologize, but it's just already there. This line, especially delivered by, Jason Isaac, when he finally translated, I think is one of the most powerful moments in the movie. And I'm just going to read it out, and then I want to get you guys' reaction to this and how it reacts, pertains to the movie for you. Liberate tu me ex inferis. Save yourself from hell. Originally, they thought it says liberate tu me, which is save us, or save yourself, and then they get the rest of it.
Liberate me is what he thought it was.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Save me.
And when they get the whole thing and they figure out that save yourself from hell, that is the moment where the movie is the oh shit moment in the movie.
Yeah.
And this is why, just for me personally, this is the moment when this movie went from on one level to being Dante for me, because the Latin, obviously, but then I tend to infer certain things based on the use of Latin and things like that, and it's mostly because of the way I write and what I write about. So, but I wanted to hear what you guys' reaction was to the Latin in this movie, the scene, the video log that goes along with it, especially when we get the full video log. None of my family will watch this movie with me because of that scene. They've seen a little bit of it and they're like, hell no, we will not watch this. So I'm the only one that's watched it. So I wanted to see your reaction, because this movie does not skimp on the disturbing imagery at all. At all. I mean, this movie is visually disturbing. How this is only an R-rated movie is
Actually,
little.
Those scenes were pared down quite a bit for a theatrical release.
Wow. Well, I definitely want to hear what you guys think about this. Do you think it went too far? Would you go farther? And what you thought of the use of the Latin in there, and what connotations they had for you. I'm going to start with Steve and then go to Jeff. So, Steve, what did you think?
Yeah, it seems like the Latin tends to go back a lot to a lot of these old horrors, especially like the 70s style demonic possession horror, where you sort of deal with Latin being used by priests and so forth.
The Omen.
Omen. The Omen. Yeah, the Omen for sure. yeah. The Exorcist thing, things like that. The power of Christ compels you.
It is kind of fun. I think Sam Neill also played the Antichrist.
Yeah. The things I cut my teeth on, the Omen and the Exorcist, watching them at 7 years old, that was really good, Mom and Dad.
Yeah, and they're clearly trying to echo that, especially when they're also trying to echo, Gothic architecture. They're using a lot of Christian imagery. The whole idea of like Dante's Inferno and whatnot that you've been talking about. So I think they're definitely trying to reinforce those horror themes. It's like it is a little. It does kind of like raise eyebrows as to why the captain conveniently is somebody that likes to speak Latin, but whatever, it works for the movie.
Right.
It works for that character. I'm kind of willing to let that go. But I think a lot of it is about reinforcing the themes and the religious themes. The idea of saving yourself, because really a lot of it is about not just hell, but the idea is the hell is basically what humans bring to it with the darkness within themselves, and because that's ultimately what this creature is doing. This creature is tempting everyone with their fears, with their failures, with these dark moments from their past. And, they're succumbing to these things, and they're becoming these horribly murderous people, stripping away everything that's civilized about them, and turning them into demons, essentially. And so I kind of feel like the Latin really suits not just the genre, but the tone of the movie, the whole idea of the fall into darkness, essentially the idea of basically the event horizon, as being one of the circles of hell, in essence, and especially and what is the worst level of hell reserved for? Betrayers. You find that plenty of those in this movie, especially here. but also the people aboard the previous ship, or at least the previous crew. You certainly see that as they turn on each other. So all of the bonds of civility, everything that makes a so-called civilized person, is being destroyed with all that. And I think the Latin really is definitely meant to echo that inner struggle gone wrong. The whole idea of the demonic influence aboard this ship, and the hope of redemption by finding faith, which we see with the medallion of Saint Christopher or whatnot.
One of the things that I love about this movie, before I go to Jeff, and it all ties back to the scene, is that a lot of times people want to separate this idea of the paranormal as far as demonic and everything and put it over here with priests or exorcists or magic or whatever it is. And then you have science fiction and hardcore science fiction over here. And there's been very few properties that have really dealt with this idea that who knows what the line is between the metaphysical and the science and where they meet, and what will happen someday if we actually, if those two things really exist, if you believe in those, do we actually cross those boundaries, and what happens? And the only property I can think of that really kind of that broaches this is Warhammer 40K, where you have Space Marines fighting chaos demons, and I think it's so fascinating, and that's one of the reasons I love this movie.
I would also argue that the Doom goes there
to a certain extent. Yes, I think you're right. You're right. So I think that's one of the interesting aspects, and I think it's something that would be cool to play with. Is this idea that you don't have to be religious to write necessarily about religious things, but this idea that this metaphysical concepts that we believe in, demons and angels and everything, have some sort of scientific explanation out there. And someday we could cross over into a place where we really don't want to go. And that's what this movie does. It's like some place we really don't understand and we're not prepared to deal with.
Well, was it Asimov who said that magic is basically a high tier level of science that we don't understand yet?
That was Arthur Clarke.
Arthur C. Clarke? Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I mean, definitely. And that kind of ties into this, where it's like, demonic is really a form of magic, to a certain extent. And that way it does something and we don't understand it. So we just say it's demonic powers, but, magic by any other name. So that said, Jeff, what did you think of this scene? Also, if you could talk a little bit about the disturbing imagery, because you were talking about how they pared it down a lot. I want to hear about that. Because
I got something to say about that.
Yeah, because what we did see is really disturbing. Really disturbing. I mean, there are some disturbing images.
First, let me get to the Latin. And if you're going to do a Gothic style horror, you can't go wrong with Latin. It is classic. And I kind of like the fact that again, that feels like something an old school, well-educated sort of explorer sort of dude like this captain would probably, if he's into the explorers of the past. So maybe this guy was educated enough to have Latin. I didn't have a problem with that at all. Again, here's where they pull from another movie. At first, we get a partial message, save me. Oh, no, we've got to save you. Where have we seen that else? Alien. Oh, no, we've got a distress signal. Then we get there when we start playing with it, and we're like, oh, it's not a distress signal. It is a warning. Save yourself from hell. So, oops, too late. We're already here. What are we going to do? And it's just as effective here. And so, that just lends to the whole atmosphere of things. I like Latin. I took Latin in high school, whereas all my other friends were taking Spanish. I had to take Latin.
Likewise.
I would love to know sometime why Latin gives us that creep factor. What is it? I mean,
maybe connected to the Roman Catholic Church. I mean,
maybe because of outside the church, it is basically a dead language. Although, funnily enough, I did learn how to sing "On the Road Again" by Willie Nelson in Latin, of all things.
It's pretty much a dead language in the Catholic Church now, too. So, I mean.
So, getting on from that, looking at the imagery. Now, they shot a lot more. And in the test screenings and the censors kept having them pare it down. It was too disturbing for the test audiences. It was too disturbing for the producers and things. So this is why they show it in strobe-like flashes.
Yeah.
It was the only way where it becomes almost subliminal.
Correct me if I'm wrong real quick, but what we do see borders on NC-17 for the time. Am I wrong?
Well, I went frame by frame because I'm curious like that.
Because you are who you are. You know?
I am who I am. So
I would say I was reminded a bit of Serenity with that whole scene.
I kind of have this need to know about the worst things, so I just went ahead and went there. And so going frame by frame, I kind of wonder what else they shot, because in the playback, there is you can call it sex, but you could probably also call it rape, because they're giving in to all their worst desires. There is murder going on, and there apparently is also cannibalism going on.
Yep.
And so there's just a whole lot of awfulness going on in these scenes. And so it's this orgy of violence of all the worst things meshed into one thing. And of course, the one scene that we really linger on is the captain having ripped out his own eyes, because where we're going, we won't need eyes to see.
Yeah.
So you've got that sort of thing going on. And then later when Sam Neill shows Lawrence Fishburne, gives him a little taste of what's to come, I got distinct Hellraiser vibes from that, because
absolutely.
You talked about people being turned into demons. So what do we see? There's no barbed wire on the ship, but what do we see? We see faces wrapped in barbed wire. We see people hanging up by hooks and chains. Very Hellraiser in that. We see a couple other things like spikes coming out of mouths, and you imagine like the crew being impaled on the spikes in that horrible room where the gravity drive is. And so, and when you look at when you look at Dr. Weir, he is basically a Cenobite. The Cenobites are all mutilated so that they can rise to the level of angels to some, demons to others. And he's clearly gone to that extreme. After his fake wife rips out his eyes, the next time he appears, he is slashed all over the place. So, you could call him like Incision Man, instead of Pinhead or something like that. Mm-hmm. Although, just from a special effects point of view, Sam didn't like wearing the torn out eyes prosthetic. So when they brought him back, he's like, hey, can we not do stuff around my eyes? I didn't like that. That's why he ends up with like the cuts all over his body instead of the eyeless feature that we would see with his wife all the time and with the captain. But yeah, you totally get that sort of thing. And, he's even bald in that scene, and he comes out of the water as if he is being born again, born anew, and he's naked. Mm-hmm. And so he is a new creature, baptized in fire, in blood, of the whimsy of whatever creature inhabits this ship now. And so, he is a full-on demon. We can see that he's got superhuman strength in the scenes.
Yeah.
And he's throttling people with one hand, holding them, impossibly in the air with one arm, kicking them across rooms, just all sorts of things like that. He can see without eyes. Yeah, he's a full-on demon at that point.
And I will say, as someone who loves 40K, right?
Yeah, it definitely. There, you definitely get some 40K vibes out of this movie too.
This is Slanesh. The chaos, for the people who don't know, Chaos Gods there is the god of pleasure and pain. That whole scene is the pleasure in pain, and it's horrifying. It's absolutely disturbing.
Because I don't remember, like, he keeps talking about he's got such sights to show you now. Like, Justin was so traumatized by what he saw, he was willing to jump out into an open vacuum. But Weir is delighting in it. So he's given into that whole pleasure and pain, like it didn't break his mind the way it did Justin's, but we
it's the idea of trading your eyes for wisdom, and that's exactly what he did. He sacrificed his eyes for forbidden knowledge.
Yeah,
and like you said, Steve, this guy has been worked on for a long time, so he's been prepped for this.
Yeah, it's really. It is there. Like I said, there are so many levels of this movie, and we scratched the surface. But the less level I want to get to before we get to our potpourri round is I want to talk about the ending, specifically two things. One is that the second in command, and I got to find her name real quick.
Stark, I believe.
I called her Diet Ripley.
Okay. She, Stark, so played by Jolie Richardson, she is rescued by Cooper, and it's Cooper, Justin, and Stark get off the ship, and they get in the lifeboat, and she wakes up, and the guy who comes to rescue her, it turns out to be Weir, and it turns out to be a nightmare, and then the ship closes. Okay, that add-on scene when it wasn't Weir felt added on. It felt like the original ending was supposed to be something much worse. 2, I'm still not sure they're out of the woods, even when that door closes suddenly like that. I don't know. It's like the whole thing. If I'm in a bad mood, I think that they're all screwed for eternity. So.
And the question is, was what she saw a dream, or was it the event horizon playing with her head with gravitational distortions?
Yeah. So I want to kick it to you guys. You know, it doesn't have to be a huge long thing, but I want your opinion on the ending and what you thought it meant. You know, where did these 3 end up? Did Cooper, Stark, and Justin get away? And I'm rooting for Cooper and Stark, and Justin. You know, I'm lukewarm on Justin. Justin is Justin. But did they get away, or are they hosed? You know, I mean, are we really going to the dark place where it's just saying, you guys really didn't do anything wrong. You 3 were the most innocent characters, and you're still effed, you know? So, Steve first, what did you think?
Well, nobody gets out of hell intact, and I think this is basically what happened. I really honestly kind of wonder whether the event horizon let them get away, because now it has its hooks in them, and so now they're bringing hell with them back to Earth.
Ship back to Earth.
Yes, so
hey,
hey Adam. So what you're dealing with is the creature from beyond potentially corrupting the people of Earth with the same madness, because now he's bringing him back. And now that they brought him back, are they going to make another event horizon? Are they going to tap into the beyond again and make things worse? Are they going to end up like the Reavers in Serenity, which is what I kind of feel like this is what they're doing to them, is that they're basically turning them into Reavers.
I was thinking the thing when we saw the playback on the ship. They're like the Reavers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So anybody that sees what happens, has that thing inside them, because, they brought with them knowledge of evil. They're bringing knowledge from evil back from the event horizon, and they're bringing hell with them. So, these people are screwed regardless of what happens, because they have this thing inside them. And so maybe they were saved technically, but I'm kind of wondering whether Earth is going to get away from this thing, even if they manage to get back home. They may be for the best that they don't, because if they manage to get home and they bring this thing with them, humanity is screwed.
So what you're saying is that it may have turned out well for everyone except Alan Tudyk if Summer Glau had been around, but
yeah, basically
we don't know. So, Jeff, what about you? What'd you think?
I don't mind a bad ending for a horror film. I do like to see people triumph, but every now and then I'm definitely in the mood for a bleaker film, because and when you're dealing with horror, the happy ending doesn't always happen. There's not always a final girl. Sometimes the bad guys win because bad things happen to good people in the world, and these sorts of movies reflect that. So when I initially watched the movie back in '97, I thought that when Stark comes out of the tank, she's having a nightmare because she's had a very traumatic experience. And then she realizes, like, oh, well, actually, she doesn't even realize, the texts are there, and Cooper keeps trying to comfort her, but she keeps screaming.
Right.
And the door closes, which can just be kind of a cool cinematic thing. We're closing the door on the story. This is where it ends. But when I watched the film again today, my idea was that this is all going horribly wrong. When we look at the scans of the ship, it's like I've got life signs everywhere, and it shows the whole ship is lighting up. even though the gravity drive is the heart of the ship, there were life signs all over the ship. The entire ship is alive. So bringing back any part of that ship is bringing back some part of the entity. And for me, that door closing was sealing their fate. And like Steve said, probably the fate of the entire world. Somebody else is going to get an idea for a gravity drive or some other terrible thing, and they're gonna CERN it on Earth, and game over, man. Game over.
Or at least the fate of that rescue crew, and then the next one.
Oh no, that boat's going back to the planet.
Yeah, it really is, and yeah, when I first watched this, I was fine at first. I was like, okay, she has been rescued. She had a nightmare, and she was remembering, and Cooper's bringing her back. But when that door closed, there was just this sense of finality to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really could be a cinema, just an effect that they used. But to me, it was like a sense of foreboding finality. Like, yeah, you are screwed. So
yeah, remember, like, Sam even told him, like, there's no escape, and that's like the ship locking them in. Yeah. There's no reason for that door to close if there's nobody there to close the door.
Yeah, and it just makes me so sad for Cooper. It's like Cooper is the kind of guy I could see never giving in. They would try and get him the whole time and be in hell fighting them the whole time.
I don't remember who it was in our Twitter chat, but somebody's like, I could watch a movie just on Cooper.
That was me.
Some cool action.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like he was such a fun character in the film. And I love the way he saved himself by doing the risky maneuver of blowing the oxygen tanks to fly back to the event horizon. Like, Cooper was a cool dude, and you definitely want him to survive. You want him to make it.
He was braggadocious. He was braggadocious, but had a reasonable sense of fear. And he had the skills to back it up, But he wasn't bragging, like, he wasn't a moron, So he knew enough when to be scared and get the hell out of Dodge, too, So I love Cooper as a character. Literally,
you want something strong, hot, and black inside you. Yeah. It's funny because that actually kind of sets up the end, because he survives, him and Stark, and that's a proposition.
Yeah.
He's holding her at the end, so I felt like that was kind of a nice little book in there.
Yeah, he's just an amazing character, really good. If you haven't seen the movie, pay attention to Cooper. He's just cool throughout the whole thing. And so is Lawrence Fishburne. I mean, let's get real. I mean, this was the time of Morbius and everything else. I mean, Lawrence Fishburne could not be cool in a movie at this point in his career. So,
Yeah, this was right before he did Matrix. So.
Yep. So last but not least, we always end with potpourri, where I let my co-host go ahead and give us a little bit of illumination on whatever we didn't talk about that they really want to hit us up with. So I'm going to start with Jeff, finish with Steve, and then we'll go ahead and call it a day on another great podcast. So, Jeff, potpourri.
One thing that did bother me about the film, a couple of things, and so I want to talk about a couple of the negatives. The music for the starting credits and the ending credits are completely inappropriate. It's this kind of rock techno music, which sets you up thinking you're about to watch an entirely different film. And, this is coming about around the same time period as the Mortal Kombat movie. And that's what it felt like to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, whoa, this doesn't suit what I'm about to see at all. It puts you, if you don't know anything about the film, you just happen on this and, like, say at the time, like HBO or Showtime or something like this, you're like, oh, cool space adventure. It feels like a space action movie. And they're like, this movie just took me to hell. What the crap? So that was a bizarre choice, because the score for the rest of the film is very appropriate.
I also, on that note, I also have to say, I don't think this movie was marketed very well at all.
No.
I stumbled upon this movie in the I'm going to age myself again, in the Blockbuster dollar videos in like 1998, and picked it up. And I was like, how did I not hear about this movie at all? I had never heard of it at all. And
it's funny because Paul Anderson did pitch it as a haunted house in space, and that's how you should have marketed it.
Mm-hmm.
Like a classic little teaser, like the way they did with Alien, in space, no one can hear you scream. The mysterious egg cracking open. There's so many ways you could have successfully marketed this film. It's a real shame that it didn't get more play. The second thing that bothered me about the film was the ending. Again, and you're talking about things that are tacked on. The ending for me got a little Hollywood. This is not a film about physical confrontation. This is a film about metaphysics and survival.
Mhm.
And to that end, you can't beat the cosmic horror. And so when Lawrence Fishburne starts like getting into a dust up with Sam Neill at the end, I was like, this feels so out of place compared to the rest of the film. You know, when like they should just be trying to get away no matter what. They should be trying to figure out how to close him off into a part of the ship or use implements on the ship to impede his progress somehow, slow him down, keep him away from them so they can make their escape. Getting into a fight with him just it was pointless. It felt really, really out of place. I didn't like it at all. It didn't jive with me. Fortunately, it was a very truncated part of the film, and so it didn't ruin it. But yeah, that's not where I would have gone. So it took a film that I thought was mostly pretty great, and that's a blemish.
I will say it's my experience that most movie studios do not let you do psychological horror movies with no action sequences, especially at the end, unless your name is John Carpenter, who usually does stuff on his own or smaller budget, Clive Barker, or Stephen King.
Now,
You know,
if you
and,
let me give you a perfect example, and probably because this was a foreign director shooting his own thing. I believe the film's called Hereditary. It's by the same writer director who created Midsommar. Now there's a slow burn psychological horror movie that ramps up, and at the end, you do get some pretty violent action at the end, but it's appropriate to the movie and the movie that's been built up by this time. Whereas this just, like I said, it just felt too Hollywood for me. It's like, oh, you know what? We need a little. Let's have this guy throw a fireball. And let's have him hit him with this thing. We're gonna steal from Predator a little bit. Arnie's gonna get in a fight with the Predator, even though he can't possibly win. And that's how it kind of felt to me.
There's a made real quick before I go to Steve. There is a made-for-movie TV miniseries by Stephen King where they even did the same thing, where the whole miniseries is based on the psychological aspect, and it's in a haunted house about it eating people, and then at the end they have to put the action scenes in.
Was that Rose Red?
Yeah, Rose Red.
Yeah.
And I love Rose Red right up until the point where they're fighting to get out of fighting zombies to get out of Rose Red. It's like that's not what this whole movie was about,
Yeah,
so,
that always struck me as weird too.
Yeah. Steve, potpourri.
Okay, yeah. As far as the music goes, I really think that they were trying to sample the original Shining theme a little bit. There are a couple of points where you listen to it and you kind of notice a little bit of that in there, and they were trying to mess with that, but it didn't come out right. I agree with that. I likewise have issues with the ending, and here part of the problem also is like they throw out the very hard sci-fi tone that they were going for most of the movie towards the end, because you see with Justin like how they were treating decompression and extended time being out in space and what that would do to the human body. And when they blow out the entire bridge, they all conveniently have air. There's nothing going wrong with them. It's like that somebody else completely wrote a different draft, and this ending got Frankensteined at the end by somebody else, and it just doesn't really fit. Not to mention that it gets a little bit comic booky towards the end. Yes, this is what was really going on all along, and this is the big reveal, and I will explain everything to you. There's all of that there. So yeah, I mean, you could definitely tell. There was something welded on with that whole scene, and that doesn't quite fit, and it just seems clunky right around that time. And for the longest time, it was kind of hard for me to put my finger on exactly what that was. I think that was part of it. In addition, there was actually an extended cut of this movie that we are never going to see because it was destroyed. There was a longer version of the film, and they had kept the film in Romania, and then it ended up getting degraded so much that they couldn't recover it. So we are never going to see the full
Does
film.
nobody make copies? Ugh.
Yeah, they didn't think it out, and that's really unfortunate because I think that the full version of this movie probably would have fixed some of the issues that this movie has, which are not that many. I mean, as it is still a really really great film. But I kind of feel like it would have been better if we could see what Anderson really was going for in full, and we just didn't get that.
Well, to pick up on both your points, specifically about the ending, you know, I've already said a little bit about what I thought about the ending as far as the action scenes and everything. It felt to me like, once again, studios do what they always do, which is try and copy successful movies. 2 years before this movie came out, Clive Barker came out with Lord of Illusions. You could see the ending of this movie is almost a parallel to what a lot of what is going on with Lord of Illusions, you know,
And you know,
minus Scott Bakula and his contractually obligated sex scene that he always has in every movie.
When I look at the end of Lord of Illusions, I don't feel like the action was over the top. I felt like the action they put in was appropriate for that movie.
But I think that they copied Lord of Illusions, you know, type thing into this movie. Some studio exec was like, oh, we can't have whatever it is they wanted to do. We need to do what Lord of Illusions was doing because that's Clive Barker and that's Lord of Illusions. And that did well, you know, because, you know, and I think one of the reasons it did well is because it had Clive Barker's name on it. You put Clive Barker's Lord of Illusions, people are going to go to the theater in the summer and go watch it, you know.
Well, it's like I've heard rumors of them wanting to make a Joker 2 with Joaquin Phoenix. It's like, no, that needs to be a standalone film. Yeah. I don't care how successful it was. If you make it 2, it's going to suck. Don't do it.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, with you know, what was I going to say? Yeah, like I said, with this movie, it's like, I honestly, and I used to go to a lot of movies, especially at this point. You know, my wife and I had no kids, so we were going to the movie theaters all the time. I never remember this movie being out in theaters, ever. I don't remember seeing it in theaters. I don't remember seeing an ad for it in theaters. That's not good. So, you know.
I don't remember if I saw it in the theater or not.
I remember seeing ads for it on TV, but not that well.
Yeah, I don't, you know.
I didn't see it for years and years.
I'm trying to remember
trailers for it, that's for sure.
I mean, this was at the point, I'm thinking, 1997. So I was traveling a lot. So I was definitely seeing a lot of movies because I was stuck on army bases all the time with nothing else to do but go to movies. So I really don't understand how I never saw this movie. So, you know, yeah.
It's funny because, like, you know, you can miss a lot of real gems. Like, I happened to see the horror classic Pumpkinhead. Never heard anything about it. I was just deciding I was going to go to the movies one night, and there was this cool looking poster on the marquee. It's like, I'm going to check out that movie.
Yeah.
Same thing for Friday night.
I remember I saw several movies like that at this time, like Austin Powers. I think I was actually in Killeen, Texas on a Sunday night with nothing to do. If you've ever been to Killeen, Texas, there's nothing to do on Sunday night. So I went to the movies and saw Austin Powers. So, you know, right outside Fort Hood there. So, so with that said, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Steve, so much.
Yeah, it's really been fun discussing this movie. I could talk about this movie over and over again. I mean, there's just so much in there as we've already unpacked. And so, yeah, I'm always glad to be here.
Yeah, this is always fun. And we got lots more lined up. Speaking of which, Stevie's going to be picking our next movie. So I know he's thinking on that, and we'll get back to you. And then I think we're going to be doing Idiocracy after that, Mike Judge. And then if the guys will bear with me, I will talk to them about this after the podcast is over. I would like to indulge one of my guilty pleasures and do a romantic comedy. So we'll see if I could get them to watch a romantic comedy. So yeah, you're going to see the little lighter side of Nim. I like romantic comedies, you know, more than my wife actually. So I don't know what that says, but there it is. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Always a pleasure. Like the rest of you guys, this is a movie I could dive so much deeper into. So much going on here. But I'm glad to talk about it for whatever amount of time we have, and look forward to what we're going to do next.
Absolutely. So until next time, we'll be having a Steve special next time, and then Idiocracy in 2 weeks. So stay tuned, break out that popcorn, watch the movies, and let us know if there's a movie you'd like us to cover. Until then, we'll see you next time with Cinema Crusaders. We're out.